All right, today we are going to cover SQL database triggers. There's a few different types of triggers. Go over how they can be nested. We'll go over database level triggers and then some demos. So the after trigger, it occurs after you insert into a table, you delete or you update a table. You can access the data that you are changing. If you're deleting data, you can access it through a special table called deleted. If you're inserting data, you can access that data through a special table called inserted. When you're doing an update, there's no special table called updated. It does a delete first and then an insert. So you access, there's only two special tables that you can get to.
Those are on all systems?
Yeah, on all the SQL systems. And you can disable triggers or enable them. These triggers are only going to fire if at least one row is affected. So you can't insert nothing into a table and have a trigger fire. You can use the trigger to roll back the insert if you want. Let's say you're doing an insert and you have an after insert trigger on there. You insert the rows into the table. It just kind of keeps it in memory, and then it does the trigger. And then after the trigger is completed, if you didn't roll it back, then it will actually write that to the table. The after trigger is synonymous with the for trigger, so you might see a create trigger for table for insert. The after delete trigger, a little note here, you can get around that, or a little surprise thing here is when you truncate a table, it does not call the delete trigger. It bypasses the trigger. The after update stores it in deleted or inserted special tables.
What bypasses the?
When you use a truncate.
Truncate. Oh.
Truncate does not fire the trigger. So on this little example here, you can see that how you reference the inserted special table. I could replace that with deleted. Okay. So now there's the instead of triggers. It has the same characteristics as the after triggers, but it actually stops direct access to the table that you're trying to insert to. So when you have instead of insert trigger and you go to insert into that table, that trigger takes that inserted data, puts it in that special table, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can toss it out. Or you can insert into the table you're trying to. So it's kind of like an abstraction layer a little bit. Nesting triggers. You can nest. You can insert into a table from inside a trigger, which that table you're inserting to has another trigger on it. So yeah, it can get complicated, and it's probably better to avoid them. But if that is the case, you have to be wary that it can be doing that. And there's a nest level system variable that you can access, and you can see, am I in the initial trigger, and then am I in the secondary trigger. So if you had two tables and you were using one trigger to insert into another table, which was kicking off a trigger there, and you wanted to do certain logic in that case, you could throw some logic in there saying is at nest level 2, and then that would catch that the trigger was actually being a nested trigger at that point in time, and you could bypass the logic if you wanted to. Ddl triggers are at the database level. You can create them, or you can have them occur when you or after a create table or a drop table. You can't do an instead of. You can only do afters or fors. And as you'll see, it's useful for maybe enforcing naming conventions on tables, or there's a whole bunch of data you can access when this event occurs through event data. It's an XML data type. We'll see what the data is later on in the demos, but you can use it to see if people are using an older naming convention and stop them from creating a table, or maybe limit the users. Or all right, on to demos. So drop and create database. I will create 3 tables, no triggers on them, table A, B, and C. All right, so do a little demo on creating triggers. So create trigger and then the name. Now this one I just say insert table B from table A on and the table name. After insert, as, and then begin and end with the logic inside of it. So it's going to create a trigger named this on table A, and what's going to happen is every time you insert a row into table A, it's going to insert that row. It's a 1 column table. Insert that row into table B from inserted. So create that. Now we will run this insert statement, which will run 3. It'll insert tests AA, test BB, test CC into table A. It's going to duplicate those rows into table B as well. So we can see here 3 rows affected and 3 rows affected. So now we'll do a select star from table A and table B, and we can see that the data exists in both of them. To drop triggers, you don't say alter table drop trigger like you do with drop constraint or drop column. You say just drop trigger and it drops it. So we'll delete the tables. Okay, so now we're going to see rolling back transactions, sort of.
So Aaron, if the trigger did something else to table A again, would you also see another rows affected message? You know, or because that's sort of a hint, right, that something else happened when you did the insert.
Right. So now we're going to create another trigger. Table A, table B. We're going to block the insert of the test BB. So create the trigger on table A after insert. Begin. Just declare a variable. We'll set the variable equal to the only column in the inserted special table. And if that equals test BB, then roll back. Otherwise, insert it into table B. So we'll create that trigger. And we will insert into table A. That should pass all of our logic and go into both tables. Table A at the top, table B is at the bottom. So now we'll run this one. We'll insert test BB into table A, and our trigger caught that, and it says the transaction ended the trigger, the batch has been aborted. So when we run our selects, we don't get any of it. And we'll insert test CC into it, and that passes, so we get data in both of our tables. Clear the data, drop the trigger. Now we'll get into instead of triggers. So similar creation, create trigger, and the trigger name on the table we want to create it on. And now we say instead of insert, as insert into table B, select the column 1 from our inserted special table. So this won't insert anything into table A. It'll just redirect that insert into that secondary table. Create the trigger. Now when we run all of these, we can see that nothing was inserted into table A, and all of them were just redirected into table B. So delete those.
Too bad they're working with the system.
Yeah. So
When did
Great.
you use that?
yeah.
Good reason?
Examples I've seen for reasons of using instead of inserts was maybe to kind of not allow direct access to a table. So you'd say instead of insert, and maybe like do a warning message or something, instead of update, instead of delete, and that would just lock down that table.
I see, yeah,
Okay.
I guess that's legitimate.
But that could be enforced through users.
Because if you
and
move
permissions
data
as
from
well.
one table to another, you could still redirect it and
Yeah.
leave the code in place until
Yeah.
you fix it up.
But
Right,
yeah,
that's good.
But
it's a very behind the scenes way of doing
just
things,
add
which
ugliness to
which
it.
isn't apparent and can add confusion. All right. So on to nesting triggers. We'll create a trigger on table A that will, with an instead of insert, that will redirect to table B. Got a wild phone appeared.
What the heck is that?
Yeah, well, anyway,
This is ringtone.
so
That's
we'll create a trigger, and instead of insert trigger on table A, that will insert into table B. And on table B, we will create an instead of insert trigger that will insert into table C. So create those two. And we will insert into table A a record that should get caught by its first trigger and pushed to table B, and table B's trigger will catch it and push it to table C. We can see here that the first result set is A, second result set is B, and the third result set is C. We can see that even though inserted into one table, the nested triggers caught it and pushed it into another table.
And it did say when all affected for A and B also, when you ran it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I'll see 2 rows in there. Okay, up those triggers. And delete the tables. All right, so now we're going to get on to DDL, database level triggers, and event data. So for this one, the event data message that gets returned is XML. So we're going to create a table, and there's will be a trigger on the database that will catch that creation and push that event data message into like a logging table. We'll call it that. So we'll create the table event data with one column called message. It'll be the XML data type. And we will create our trigger. So create trigger and then the name, query training create table on database. And then for, which is synonymous with after create table as, and then we will insert into this table event data the values event data. So create that one. And that's okay. So now we've got the trigger. So we're going to create table test, just a single column. You can see here we've got nothing in our event data table. So we'll create that. Now we've got an XML message inside of our table. So we run that. We can see here that this is all of the XML that gets created or is available in the event data variable when a table is created. You can see the event type, when it was done, the session ID, server name, login, database schema, blah, blah, blah. We can see the actual text that was, or the statement that was ran. So some examples for this was, enforcing, because you could use XPath or query the XML to pull out the name, pull out the schema, and you could check to see if you're not prepending your tables with a T underscore, or you're not using certain words in a table name. So it's just a way to kind of add a check in there when people are creating tables or objects to enforce your coding standards. All right, slides and
So that's a
recording
create
is available
trigger.
at SQL Triggers, and that's it.